will let people, and we are recording, Devin will let people in as they arrive. My name is Tamara Taggart, and I am so happy to welcome you to cohort 4, 5. My script says 4, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not right. I feel like this is number 5. It is number 5. It's the last one of the year, and we're very excited to have you here. I am joining you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I am very grateful to be raising my family here and to be joining you from the stolen lands today. So we have an action-packed hour and a bit for you to get things started. I was just talking to her. Elder Sequalia is here, Anne Wannick, to give us an opening song and prayer, because we could not get started without Syexwaliya to do this with us. So Syexwaliya.
Tayachtin, I welcome all of you, those who are in Coast Salish territory, Squamish Nation, my nation, Tsleil-Waututh and Musqueam, and I honor, respect, and acknowledge the ancestral traditional territories where you all live, work, and play, wherever it is in BC or the country. I welcome you to this awesome event, the last one of the year, and I put my hands up to all of you. And as you can see in my background, I have Baby Yoda, Old Yoda, R2D2, C3PO, and believe in Star Wars because of the Force. And my late grandfather and Coast Salish Longhouse elders said, we all have the inner energy, a force. And that if we believe in our own inner energy, we can heal ourselves emotionally, mentally, physically, to a small degree, not really serious illnesses that are here nowadays that weren't existent before contact. And and also spiritually, and that we can send our energy to each other and receive from each other, as well as we receive from Creator through the top of our head into our energy. I just need to move Curious. He's going to get scared of the drumming. And so you can't have your arms like this, hands like this, or hands like this, because then you're blocking your energy. So I just ask you all to open your hands and your energy and take a few breaths and ground yourself. And while I sing the song, Greeting of the Day, I ask that you pray for each other, all gathered here, and all your family, friends, and community. And when I finish the song, I'll do a prayer to start you off in a good way and ground you. And then I unfortunately have to leave, so I'm going to miss the awesome discussion that I would like to have been able to stay for. I was elected to Squamish Nation Council, and I'm also one of the appointed council spokespersons with my nephew Wilson Williams, and today is council day. So, Oichacha. Chen Quen Mentomi Kakakana Chesiam. Yonsio and so to Noyap and Manman to squalls to seats, Yonsio Manman squalwin, Yonsio Manman and Quado Chet Yap squalwin, O Siaya Chet Yap squalwin, O Kameo Chet Yap squalwin. Asking you, Creator, to watch over each and every one of your children gathered here today and all of their family, friends, and villages where they're from and where they live, work, and play. Put a shield of protection around all of them and keep them safe in the days going ahead. And also help all of them with their squall and the feelings in their hearts and minds, their emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual health and well-being. Prayers for all of our family and friends who have serious illnesses, injuries, waiting for surgery, had surgery, have physio, anxiety, depression, anywhere that communities where there's still COVID cases, and also all the many other illnesses and treatments. Here are prayers for their health, healing, and recovery. Here are prayers for all of our family and friends who have traumas and battle alcohol and drugs, whether prescription or illegal, especially with the toxic supply taking many. And here are prayers for all the homeless who are there because of their traumas and battles. And protect them all. Let our prayers put a shield of protection and safety around them, and especially for the homeless because of the winter and the cold, rain, and snow. And let our prayers help them with their health, healing, and recovery. Also, Creator, hear our prayers for all of the families and communities impacted by the flooding in BC, and send prayers to help them and let the waters lessen and rain slow down a bit. Even though it's winter, it's still a hard time. And also hear our prayers for all our family and friends who may have lost loved ones and have heavy feelings of sorrow in their heart. And let our prayers hold them up as they say farewell to their loved ones going home to Ancestor and Creator, and our prayers to hold them up in the healing days afterwards, and know that our loved ones who go home to Creator and Ancestors worry about us, and they, when we're low in our squalwin or something may happen, that they can help not cause you to be in an accident or hurt your body anyway. And you say, I was so lucky. That's your spirit guardian warriors. And they send signs, dragonfly, hummingbird, eagle, raven, something you don't see, song on the radio that lifts you up or maybe protects you. And that's them. Spirit guardian warriors are always watching over and by us. And again, Creator, let today be a yet one halt up, and let the presenters speak from the heart and mind in a respectful way, and everyone listen respectfully and transfer knowledge, experience, and create solutions. Tama Kwitsi Snachum, those are my words. Chen Quen Mentomi Up, I'm grateful and thankful to all of you for letting me join you this afternoon. And as my late son, who had smiles and loves for everyone, he'd always go peace and over his heart, top left. Now I say top left, peace of heart and mind. I've added love from my heart to your heart, air hugs, which I up you all take care. And because I won't see you maybe till the new year, have a great December and a great Christmas and New Year's, and most importantly, be grateful for family and friends and being together. Back to you, Tamara.
Thank you so much, Sequalia, to always start DN off in such a beautiful, inspiring way. So thank you so much. I am happy now to hand things over to Chastity. This is her baby, and she has brought us all together. And I'm just so happy to see that we're on cohort 5, Chastity, and it's really exciting.
thank you so much, Tamara, for being with us here again for the launch of Cohort 5. And good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name's Chastity Davis-Alphonse, and I'm so excited to be here today with all of you to launch Cohort 5, which will launch on January 4th. We're doing the launch a little bit early as we didn't want this event to get lost in the holidays and the New Year celebration. So we're here a little bit early and just also want to acknowledge Sequalia for her continued support, her prayers, her medicine, her drum song, her wisdom, her knowledge, and her humor and her strength. And just again, congratulate her for her election to Squamish Nation. And recent, I think it was like this week, yesterday or the day before, that she was appointed as one of the official spokespersons for the Squamish Nation. So you'll see more of Sequalia in the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and hopefully at a whole other bunch of places. Just love seeing her and opening up our events in a very good way. I'm calling in today from the beautiful and unceded and ancestral territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples out here, which is more commonly referred to in the mainstream as Ottawa. And I'm out here for meetings with the federal government, and I met with Senator Mary Jane McCallum just like 45 minutes ago, had a wonderful lunch with her to talk about deyen and having the Senate take deyen, and all of the MPs as well. So just out here spreading the good word. Doing the work. And if you don't know about Senator Mary Jane McCallum, she's a Métis Indigenous woman that is doing some very important work at the Senate level to include Indigenous women's voices, knowledge, and wisdom into policy making. So she's a fantastic advocate and strong woman leader for all of us. She'll be at one of our events next year to share about the work that she's doing. So looking forward to that and having her there. And welcome to all of you today for being here. We have an exciting agenda where we're going to have Leah Bartko from the Métis Nation talking about her experience through deyen, and also just so honored and privileged to be in the presence of one of our most brightest Indigenous women leaders. Yukon Regional Chief Kluane Adamek has taken time out of her busy schedule to come and share about the theme of climate change and matriarchal leadership. And she's just doing phenomenal work in the Yukon territory, leading the way, bringing in her traditional knowledge and her modern day education, and really leading the way for having discussions and initiatives for climate change in the North, and has been affecting change across this nation. So just so excited to have her here. And then we also have Devin, who everybody seems to be named Devin today, but Devin is actually a real person, and she is the machine behind the emails, the admin, the chat, like everything. And just really want to acknowledge Devin and lift her up for the work that she's been doing to make sure that deyen continues to run as I'm out in the world. So thank you so much, Devin, for being here. And then also just for Tamara Taggart for her continued support for this work as well, and all of you for coming today. So we're launching Cohort 5 on January 4th, and Devin's going to put a 25% off code in the chat. It's deyen25. And so that's a special 25% off for the holidays. So if you want to gift an invitation to transform to one of your loved ones, family members, colleagues, or network I would really strongly encourage you to ask them to gift them a gift of Canadian history through the lens of Indigenous women. It's a 4-module course that we'll hear more about from Leah Bartko, and it really talks about our history, our shared history here in Canada, but through an Indigenous woman's lens. So we have 6 phenomenal Indigenous women that have taken part in the modules, and they share their strength, wisdom, hope, knowledge, lived experience, and really take us deep into the aspects of history as it relates to Indigenous peoples, Indigenous women. And it's truly a transformative experience. And so that's why we're all gathered here today, is to celebrate that we are going to have a new cohort starting on January 4th. And I think that what you'll hear from Leah and others that are on here that have taken the course, that it's just been transformational for them. So just wanting to give you the code up front. I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here today, and hand it back over to Tamara to take us through the rest of the agenda, and just looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Chastity. And Chastity, before you go, I just want to mention, I want you to talk about what you said to me. You know, it's such a thing for people to buy a course. I'm famous for it. I buy a course and then I don't do it. And then I just do it whenever I get around to doing it. And you said something that actually transformed the way I thought about taking all these courses. And tell everyone what you said.
Yeah, I think that it's with deyen, I know that it is a business, but it's really, we want people to come and take the course. Like, we want you to come and finish the 4 modules and take part in them, and take part in the 2 live Zoom calls that come along with the course. And we want you to really fully accept that invitation to transform. So there's 90 days that you have to complete the 4 modules, which is about 8 hours over 90 days. So you can, like, the cool thing about it is that it's self-directed. So it's like, if you have an hour on a lunch hour, you can get logged on, watch a module and listen to a module for an hour. There's audio, videos, songs that are sang by 2 beautiful Chilcotin women. And there is, like, journal reflection. So you can do it on your own time, and you can schedule those 8 hours of self-directed learning over the 90 days. So it is achievable. And we really want folks to, like, if you do sign up, to really fully accept that invitation to transform.
Mm-hmm. And what if people are wondering, is it suitable for a teenager to take this? Is it suitable for, a 15-year-old to take this or something? What would you say?
Yes, it's all, I think, all ages and races, and for everyone. There's nothing within the course that would be not age appropriate. So if you sign up and you want your child to sit with you, or a friend to sit with you through that, I encourage that as well, to have people with you and watching some of the videos. So it's really for everyone. And that's why we say that it is an invitation to transform.
Right.
And deyen, for those of you who are new here, is a Chilcotin word for a person that has the gifts to transform. And I'm married into the Chilcotin Nation, and I see my husband's sister here, Pam. Nice to see you, Pam. And so when we were talking about this platform, he generously gifted and said we should call it deyen. And it's about, and that translates into a person who has the gifts to transform. And he said that, like, the elders say that everybody has the gift to transform. And that's why we named the platform deyen, so that it creates that space for everybody to have that opportunity and that invitation to transform their thinking around our history.
Okay, one more thing. one more thing. We always have lots of women show up for these lunch hour events where we talk about deyen. This course is for men too. This course, like, men should take this course,
Yes.
so that they see it through the lens of Indigenous women.
Yeah, and I do encourage people to maybe gift this to a man in your life for Christmas. My dad took the course and loved it and is a champion for deyen. And we have had about, a handful of men take it, but it is the majority women. But yes, definitely, I've seen in the chat too that I have noticed a few men here today too. So bring your friends.
Yeah.
Today as well. We'd love to have you. And really it is for everyone. It's and I think that it is truly a transformational experience, which we'll hear from Leah in just a moment.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Chastity. And yes, Leah is here. And, we always ask someone who has taken the course and experienced it to come and, tell us all what their experience was. And every woman so far that has spoken to us about it has really shared how it transformed them and how the experience was. So Leah, we are so happy to have you here today to maybe, share with us how you found the course and what you noticed and what you would say to people who are thinking about taking it.
Sure. Yeah, great. Thank you so much for introducing me. And I'm more than happy to share my experience as a participant in this transformational course. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so. I guess first I'd like to acknowledge and thank Elder Sequalia for the song and opening this event in a good way. I'm also looking forward to listening to the words of Chief Kluane Adamek as well, and looking forward to taking with me some really helpful topics to bring in to add to my discussions with colleagues and community as well. So looking forward to that. So my name is Leah Bartko, and I'm calling in on this finally sunny day from the traditional lands of the Squamish Nation peoples. I come from a mixed ancestry background, so I am Ukrainian on my father's side and Métis and Scottish on my mother's side. So although here in BC now, I've lived most of my growing years in Saskatchewan, some might say I am a typical prairie mix in both heritage and in spirit. Really missing those open, wide sky, starry nights these days. So yeah, in taking the deyen course and being a part of cohort 4, for me, the experience was very transformational, very valuable in that it really further deepened my understanding of what reconciliation means. In that, we can't really contribute to the success of and pathway to reconciliation without learning the history of how we as a country landed here in the first place. So that foundational learning is such a big part of enriching the success of where we want to go. So Chastity and the Indigenous women speaking in the videos walk you through key elements of history and colonization that has greatly impacted all generations and nations of Indigenous peoples, and also non-Indigenous Canadians across Turtle Island as well. I work at the First Nations Technology Council, and in my role, I offer support and guidance to partners, and so I'm often in conversation about pathways to reconciliation. Often I hear from industry, where do I start? How can my company begin to contribute to reconciliation? How do we incorporate Indigenous inclusion or DEI or corporate social responsibility and recruitment goals? Companies, and people in conversation just day to day are so ready to jump into action and doing. So I like to share that true allyship begins with that first opportunity of foundational learning, and the deyen course can be that tool, to contribute to mobilizing and enriching the success of where anybody on their reconciliation journey want to go. So yeah, the course itself, Chastity and the deyen team have designed and structured the course to be very user-friendly. The course is divided into 4 modules, which you've heard. You can take them through asynchronous learning. So participating on your own was really helpful. I'm a mom of 2 very young children, so I'm very busy and often interrupted many times throughout a day. So, that's really helpful as well. And I also work full time. So it was really the perfect structure for me. And also the course itself, like the content, is offered through it's a creative mix of presentations and videos. For me, I would say the highlights were listening to the Indigenous women speakers and hearing their stories and lived experiences. I think those will be the biggest takeaways for me. You can really never forget the words and intention of really meaningful people that deliver them. So, and also in my earlier education, I don't recall learning so much about Indigenous women leadership or that matriarchal influence. In this course, is really a lot about that. You learn that here. And as a person that identifies as an Indigenous person, I'm also finding my own history and sense of community in the stories that I'm listening to. So it's, professionally and personally, this course has really been transformational for me. I think about all of the systems we use in some form almost daily, whether it be education, healthcare, technology, our justice system, how we are in relationship with the environment. These are all systems that were influenced by colonial policy. These systems we can all relate to on a daily basis in some form every day. So the deyen course teaches how racism and barriers for Indigenous people are intricately weaved into these systems. So as a participant and as you work through each module, you learn how you can contribute to changing or altering these systems so they are more inclusive and in positive relationship with Indigenous people. And after this was really helpful for me as well. After each module, you are encouraged to reflect on and recall the key concepts that Chastity teaches. Chastity poses the reflection questions in a way that really challenges you to think about how the material applies to your own personal life now, and she challenges you to consider how you can influence your own ways of being with this new knowledge going forward. Definitely some of the content is difficult to hear. And so there may be moments of discomfort, but there are also so many moments of humor and laughter and creative consideration as well. You get to listen to Indigenous women share stories and wisdom and lift other Indigenous women up. And also the slides, the images on the slides are so beautiful. So, it's overall just really a great experience. Chastity is just such a good presenter. She, shares a way of communicating and speaking the concepts where I think I heard someone say in one of our live calls with Chastity, you throughout the course, you get to have 2 opportunities to have a live call with Chastity and the rest of the participants that are in the cohort with you. And I think someone there said Chastity has a lot of really mic drop moments, and that really resonated with me because that's so true. And and I think it just really shares how the information is delivered. It's impactful, it's relatable and it's challenging. But I've also referred to this course like it's the gift that just keeps on giving. So in spirit of the holidays as well, what a great opportunity to just really give someone that gift that does keep on giving. So I'll leave it at that for now. So thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, Leah. That's so helpful and really, yeah, I loved how you painted out how, even the slides, right? Like everything. I agree with you. I am a big fan of deyen and an even bigger fan of chastity. Yeah, a lot of what you said resonated with me, especially because I feel like I have talked to my kids' schools about the teachers taking deyen. I've talked to them about trying to adapt it so that the younger kids in elementary school can take it, because I really feel there is an opportunity here to hear from Indigenous women. And it's the information and learnings and stories are told in such an impactful way. And you can't describe it until you actually see it with your own eyes. And, meeting Chastity, I interviewed her, I think it was a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago. I have no sense of time anymore in the last, with this pandemic has really tossed time out the window. And so I'm not sure how long it's been, but Chastity has, as a friend, has opened my eyes in a way that I had no idea about so many things. And I'm somebody who was in media for 30 years. And I can look back now on so many situations and see, how colonialism basically led my life for so long. And there were so many things that I didn't know, and I can't not know them now. And so it is my personal, passion to do whatever I can. And so there's lots of things that I have done to work towards reconciliation myself, and taking this course and telling everyone about it is one of those things. It's just one in many things. And I've met a lot of really great people through Chastity too. Too many people to count, really, because Chastity is a connector, and people are drawn to her. And I agree, she's an excellent educator. There's something about her delivery, but she also has some pretty amazing friends. And one of those people that I have met through Chastity is Regional Chief Kluane Adamek. And I've seen Regional Chief Adamek speak before. I am in awe of her. She is a proud Northerner. She's a citizen of the Kluane First Nation. She is an Indigenous woman with mixed ancestry in Canada. She's lived in the northern and southern parts of this country, and she is the youngest serving Yukon regional chief and the youngest ever female regional chief. And I say that because it's important. It's important for young women to have a voice, because that is where change is. No one in this country can say they didn't know about residential schools anymore. You can't say that. You cannot get away with saying that anymore. Maybe you could, I don't even know how you could, but a lot of people say, oh, I never learned about it in school. Well, guess what? Now you have learned about it. It's been in the news, you know about it. So now we can do something about it. And that's one of the things that Chastity is really taught to, is that it's Indigenous and non-Indigenous people working together for a common goal. And so Regional Chief Adamek is the youngest ever female regional chief, and she presses for change in ways that women, young people, and the next generation are included in decision-making. It's an honor to have you here, Regional Chief. It really, truly is. And you have lots to talk about. And one of the things that we said you would be talking about is climate change and the matriarchal leadership. And I think we're seeing that in the news right now a lot too. So I will hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And of course, very, very grateful to be here. Want to acknowledge Syexwaliya, and I apologize if I'm not saying that properly. I also have as some would frame as a unique name. So I'm used to having to either correct people or learn how to make corrections when attempting. So I want to acknowledge her for the beautiful opening. And, certainly I'm here joining you actually from the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish and Musqueam unceded and surrendered territories. And have been here for the last few days for some medical appointments. Actually, all is good, not to worry. But I do think, as it relates to the world and the times we're in, BC is in the state of an emergency with respect to flooding. We've got this COVID Omicron variant. And then, as Northerners, for those who may be joining, certainly equitable access to healthcare and services is something that, certainly Indigenous communities and Northern peoples really do feel. So it definitely feels like a sort of a hard and heavy time. And I think everyone is sort of like, when are we going to get out of this? And I feel you. And so I just want to acknowledge that space, because it does feel heavy and hard. At the same time, and it was during the first wave of COVID, and I took this really neat sort of one day course that my coach was offering, and it was about active hope. And so sort of, how do we find, even in those hardest of moments, find that hope? Because, when hope is still there, then there's still a path forward. And I think that's where, when it comes to deyen and that important work, I really want to acknowledge Chastity, who's also a very dear friend, and very grateful for that friendship and sisterhood, that it is finding that collective hope. And so in those moments that feel really hard, I actually started doing something that I don't do, which is journaling. And people are like, journal and meditate. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting there. But I bought this journal, and it's like, checks in with you in the morning. How are you feeling? What's going to feel good for you today? What's your dream? And I know to some this is part of their daily, but for me, I've always sort of been like, I don't know about this. But I'm on day 2 of doing this. And I can tell you that even with day 2, like it feels really good knowing that there's all this hard and heavy. And what would make this day amazing? And I'm like, well, just to be unapologetically me. Like, I think that's going to be a good day. So I think that's where, when we talk about and being from the North, I'm from the Dakhloedi Killer Whale clan. My Tlingit name is Age Ohatuasauk, Luan Kai Iche. I'm from Kluane First Nation. We are a incredibly matrilineal and matriarchal people. So we have a clan system. There's sort of 2 moieties. There's wolf and crow, and so those relationships, and you receive your clan status through your mother. And so if you are like me and have an Indigenous father and a non-Indigenous mother, there are moments where a clan may adopt you. And so, sort of bring you in to, of course, uphold the responsibilities as being a clan member. But I do want to acknowledge those matriarchs who welcomed me into the Dakhloedi clan, because when it comes to decisions and governance and the path moving forward, as we know, we really always need to look to where we've come from. And for us in the Yukon, it has always been the women that have sort of really focused in and made those decisions, and then sort of like done the directing of how things are going to be advanced. And so I think a story, and appreciated the reflections of, you know, what deyen has created in terms of that space. Stories are such an important part of that. And so we'll share a story that was shared with me, and it's a clan story. So it's a story that, you know, we want to encourage people to respect those protocols around the sharing of the story. But it's a story about the Dakhloeti people. And so in southern Yukon, some of you may wonder, wait a minute, like there's not an ocean in the Yukon. Where did the killer whale people come from? And the killer whale people came from the coast of Alaska. And so there used to be a whole lot of trading between the southeast part of Alaska, so the Juneau, sort of that panhandle, and then through the Yukon. And so there's this beautiful story about the killer whale people that were trying to make their way back to their homeland, so to the coast. And so the killer whale people were traveling, and they came to this insurmountable, huge glacier. And, you know, really a matter of life and death. What were they going to do? How were they going to pass through? Were they going to try to sort of climb? How do you climb a glacier, especially thousands and thousands of years ago, when we may not have had the same types of like different technologies, or being able to, you know, jump in a plane and fly across? Like that wasn't a possibility. It was, how are we going to safely get our clan of people to the other side of this, or move through? And so it was Awaste and Yekdushe, two matriarchs, who said, we're going to go. Like, we see a clearing right there in that glacier, and we're going to try, and we're going to go first. And so they did. And they made it to the other side of that glacier, and were able to bring through the rest of the people. And we have these songs that go with this story. And so when we look to sort of the Western science, which when we're looking at things like COVID, for example, there's absolutely a really important place and space for Western science and medicine. When we think also about climate change, we have to balance traditional knowledge in the same way that we sort of give credit to and response to Western science. And the reason I say that is because that story that I just shared, and someone would say, well, how do you know it's that old? Well, if we look to the anthropological evidence, right, that time where there were some of these glaciers and where glaciers then melted dates back about 10,000 years. And so this is where, you know, we go back to, you know, who we are and our values of reciprocity and respect, our values of the collective versus the individual. And so certainly we look to the matriarchs, who have always been the ones to sort of step in front and determine what the path would be. And when we were talking about climate change in the Yukon, I certainly feel that I've, you know, growing up, you know, continued to learn more and more about my Indigenous ancestry, being Southern Shoshone and Tlingit on my dad's side, and a whole blend of like Scottish and Irish and German on my mom's. And I'm still learning the ways of, as it relates to knowing and being, and how critical and important it is for women to continue to be leading and being involved in every single decision that's being made as it relates to the impacts of our communities, because that's how it's always been. And, you know, if we look at the last, you know, 300 years of, you know, caretakers predominantly being non-Indigenous people, you know, fair to say that, you know, things have gotten pretty rough. But for tens of thousands of years, Indigenous peoples have continued to be caretakers and stewards of this land, and ensuring that we're always taking care of and protecting her, Mother Earth. And so when it comes to the work of climate, we know that responsibilities for water, for example, whether you're Anishinaabe or Tlingit or Southern Shoshone or Tla'amin, right? The responsibilities of water sort of seems to be this, the connection that women have always had to water. And you see that sort of translate in a number of different, whether it's our nations here in Canada or across right around the world, that Indigenous women and the responsibilities to water and that connection is sort of something that our elders would say, you sort of can't explain it in English. It's just so strong. And so when we do talk about climate and matriarchal leadership, I'm always reminded to sort of go back to like who we are and where we come from. And that it has always been our way to not only include women, but that women would be making these decisions. And so quite oftentimes when it comes to this sort of Western colonial worldview, policies, legislation, that we're not there yet with ensuring that rights holders and women are at the forefront. And so I want to acknowledge, people like Catherine McKenna, who took on so much. But of course, we know if she were a man, would she have had to deal with all that she had to deal with as a federal minister? Like we can all, quite easily say the answer is no. And so how do we continue to shift and transform these approaches? And in the Yukon, we've developed a few pretty exciting ways of advancing climate action through our own lens, speaking to reconnection and creating a youth fellowship to determine what the next steps as it relates to climate and the environment will look like. And also certainly always going back to our knowledge keepers, especially the matriarchs, to check in and make sure that we're on track. And so again, all of this is sort of perhaps seen to be very oppositional to what we look to from a sort of Western colonial worldview. But that is definitely, ways that we're finding in the Yukon that we're seeing real change being impacted on the ground by going back to these very traditional ways of knowing and being in our approaches and how decisions are being made. And so I really want to acknowledge, I've got a team member who's on, Emily McDougall. She's our regional climate coordinator, and one of those who's been leading to create this new way of connection for young people as part of this climate action fellowship. But that certainly has been, this sort of balance of traditional and contemporary ways of knowing and being, but at the core that our values are at the forefront of that. And so that's been where we've also seen a number of shifts in approach. So I'll take pause there. I'm happy to sort of talk through and answer any questions. But I definitely look forward to our time today, but also as you mentioned, Tamara, the really integral moment of opportunity we have here from a place of learning and sharing with each other, that these ways of knowing and being in this worldview is something that people are still really starting to perhaps become more aware of, but also open to. And it is going to be really different than that worldview that is so common, which is that of a sort of Western colonial society and civil society. So I'll take pause, and I look forward to talking and sharing today.
I have a couple of questions right off the bat. What can non-Indigenous women, if we're going to just talk about matriarchs and women here, what can non-Indigenous women or non-Indigenous men do to lift up the voices of the Indigenous matriarchs that are working towards climate change? Like, one of the things that, that I've noticed in the news, like here we are, you mentioned the flooding, the mudslides, everything that's happening right now. It's just, we had the heat dome in the summer, and we're just going from extreme to extreme, and people are dying. They're losing their homes, they're losing their livelihood in the heat dome, just here Vancouver, I think all 600 people died in just a very short period of time. So we are in a crisis. We know that. Yet when, we were flooding, this is just my humble opinion, we're dealing with this flooding. And then in, Wet'suwet'en, we see that there's this, it was almost like it was like, look over here at the floods. And then while you're looking over there, we're going to send the police in here. And I noticed it was a lot of women, Indigenous women getting arrested, violently arrested. So I'm seeing Indigenous women on the front lines here now, where I don't recall seeing that before, at least in the news. I know it's been there, but what are your observations on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of to unpack the first part, what can people do to sort of understand in terms of that matriarchal or matrilineal? I mean, I think in a lot of cultures, it's like, you don't mess with grandma, right? Like, and that's sort of being like widespread. You don't want to like piss off the aunties because that's not a good plan for you. And I know, again, like thinking about, from our cultures being, Indigenous cultures and indigeneity here in North America, but I also think about, sort of around the world, so many different cultures and languages that, it's sort of pressing reset to say, okay, sharing a meal, if you're privileged to have access to being able to do that, sharing a meal and laughter and music seem to be this sort of like right across so many different cultures, ways of sort of connecting. And when we do that, quite oftentimes, right, it's the women who are making it all happen. So I try to help people understand that, while we are in so many ways really different in terms of some of those governance and the roles and responsibilities that matriarchs have, when it comes to like, don't mess with grandma, people sort of are like, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. I get it. I'm like, right. So then, and then try to help explain, okay, so imagine if your grandma, right, was the one that was making all the decisions and advising, grandpa and the uncles and the aunts and like the so on. And people are like, okay, yeah, that sort of makes sense to me. And so, and I don't want to sort of, and I hope it's not interpreted for any of my Indigenous sisters out there that I'm sort of downplaying by any means our roles as being, the coordinators and facilitators. That's not it. But in a way to help other people understand like how important we all know the roles of matriarchs, grandmas, aunties are, sisters, daughters in our communities, that there are so many more additional responsibilities as Indigenous women when it comes to stewards of water, the land, and all the living beings, right? So that's a way that I've sort of been able to help. And I sort of test things out personally. I have incredible Indigenous women in my world and in my circle, and I have some incredible, of course, non-Indigenous women in my circle. And I sort of appreciate that those women both like help me sort of work through, approach and talking through, and how is this going to be sort of interpreted. And so I encourage that too, as part of this process, that it is important to find those few people that you can really trust to have those really, really open conversations with, because I know it's really hard when you are an Indigenous person and people have like sort of like 30 questions, and a lot of them are really hard and heavy, and we can't always wear that. Right. So it is finding, for those of you who are non-Indigenous, it's finding, the right path for you and the people that are in your circle to be able to ask those questions, or places like deyen, where those spaces are created purposefully. Because I do know, and what I do hear is it becomes an additional burden to sort of have to, talk about residential school, and it's triggering for everyone, especially those of us who, and I want to acknowledge any and all of the survivors who are on today. And those who are intergenerationally impacted, like all of us as the second and third generation survivors, that it is triggering. And so when we talk about, to your point, like what can people do, I really think it is about just being mindful, like having all the questions. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's thinking about who and where you ask them. and just being mindful of that. And I apologize, Tamara, I forgot the second part. I think I unpacked the first.
You
But
did. You
sorry.
did for sure. And, about Wet'suwet'en and the women that we're seeing on the front lines and the women we are seeing being arrested. And I watch it as a woman, and I want to know, what can I do? This is outrageous, right? Like but am I supposed to drop everything and go there on the front lines? Like, and I think that's kind of like, I'm such a, I want a to-do list. I want you to give me a to-do list, and I want to check them off. And that's probably a very colonial way of looking at things. But when I see what's happening to Indigenous women on the front lines, they are fighting defending their land. And it's just a news story that goes on and off. And
I think that's a huge part of the media as well, right? Like, again, and I'm not, comparative suffering isn't healthy. But if we look to, when an Indigenous woman goes missing in a community, and, it was earlier this year where a young non-Indigenous woman, and, she was found later on, but the world stopped. But we deal with this every day. And so it does, I think, feel different and feel frustrating and really hard, to your point, that it's like, if this was a bunch of any other woman, how would we be responding, right? People would be outraged. It's like the same to be said for clean drinking water, right? If Toronto or Vancouver didn't have clean drinking water, the world would stop. But for some reason, right, so deeply ingrained, the prejudice and the stereotyping and the racism, let's call it for what it is still very much there. And so I think that's where, when it comes to media, and I appreciate, Tamara, people like you that are in this sort of, sort of journalist broadcast, or have been places and spaces that can sort of push to change the narrative. But I think that's what we're also really dealing with, is you don't always see the positive stories, or the things that are working, or the programs that are leading real change in communities. All we see from media is we are continue to be marginalized, murdered, and missing. And that is a very real reality. And there's also other parts of our story that need to be shared. And so when it comes to Wet'suwet'en, and I'm very mindful of, and what I've been, how I've been raised is to also be very careful about sort of talking about different nations, and especially because it's not my territory. But I think what I can comfortably say is that, people sharing, people like you and the platforms that you may have to be able to share or to speak with those individuals, those women, podcasts, ways of sharing, finding ways to get their stories told, the real story, I think is so important. And that would be, I think, something that, non-Indigenous allies can do, is if you've got influence, abilities, those connections, and I want to acknowledge that, there's earned and unearned privilege that exists. And I also acknowledge that, for me, I wasn't the kid walking around in the store getting followed like my cousins were, right? I'm, people are like, what are you? I'm not, my dad's really dark, but that's not my reality. And so I think it's also sort of being mindful to check ourselves in sort of how we approach, based on the sort of unearned privilege that we may have. And so I'm very mindful of that when speaking to some of these issues, because I come from a region that has a path as it relates to self-government and our modern treaty, and we have a process, and we have some of these things in place. And I know that in British Columbia, where there weren't sort of numbered treaties, and a lot of those, when I think about Chastity's husband's nation, the Chilcotin, when we talk about rights and title, right? There's a very different reality in the province of British Columbia than in the territory of the Yukon. So I'm just always very mindful about sort of how I approach speaking to issues that are issues that are personally not something that that I've had to deal with. I mean, and I acknowledge that. We don't have those kind of issues right now in my territory. And I do not know if it was happening in my territory, yeah, I'd probably be one of those women standing there doing the same thing. And so how do we then not create this separation of, you know, Indigenous woman to Indigenous woman to Indigenous woman? Like we're all connected and we're all one. And so I do think that, you know, your question, Tamara, is a really important one also as Indigenous women, of how do we support these women? Because it's not okay. And if it were any other group of women, it would probably not happen. But because it's Indigenous women, it's okay. And those, I think that's the story. Again, it's like that moment of having that empathy, right? That I think as humans, it's sometimes really hard to find that. But I think the more empathy we can show and compassion, I think that is going to be what sort of helps us, I don't want to say turn the page, but like have a clear look at what's really happening.
Amazing. I just learned a whole lot from you. Thank you so much, Regional Chief. Chastity. Yeah, Chastity probably has something to say here too.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. We have a question from Catherine in the chat, just asking, what can non-Indigenous youth do to be a part of climate change? How can we help our children, or how can our children be an ally to Indigenous peoples?
Yeah, I mean, and I think, you know, there are the very sort of tangible, right, examples, like the recycling, driving less, buying less. I think it's also like, it's also pushing those who are in positions of power and authority to like do things very differently, and to speak out about it. Like we look at COP, I mean, you know, things, COP26 happened in Glasgow, some shifts, but like not really. And I think this is the whole issue of sort of having harder conversations, probably at home, while you're having dinner, so that, you know, I think kids and children sort of understand on a periphery, like the like inequities that do exist between like Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. And, you know, I'm more interested in having and pushing people to have those real authentic conversations. And I've had a lot of really interesting conversations with friends sort of about this whole concept of like white guilt, right? And like, well, I don't want to feel bad, I didn't do it. And it's like, yeah, but was it still wrong? Okay, well then like, can we work from there? So I think that those conversations too at home, which I can't imagine are going to be easy, but I think that they're so important. And when it comes to climate, I think it's, I encourage you to check out, and I may ask my colleague Emily to post it for me, the Yukon First Nation Climate Action website, because the whole vision that they have, this incredible cohort of young people, is reconnection. We need to reconnect. I mean, it's that sort of, you know, very simple fact, like we're 80% of us is made of water. So how do we take care of the water that's in our bodies, but how are we taking care of all the other water too? And if we didn't have, you know, trees to air, and to some it might sound really fluffy, and like, I'm not trying to be like, you know, a David Suzuki. I love David in a lot of ways. He does super great work, but I know, you know, there's this whole, like the whole fluff that's around it. And I think one of the really good examples is like, with climate change, and we think about this, and I'm from the Yukon, I'm not from the Sumas Valley, but what I have learned through media is that used to be a lake, right? And then it was like drained. And so I'd be really interested to like spend some time with those knowledge keepers to say, like, what were the stories around that lake? Like, was that drainage of the lake? Was that a conversation that happened with the Indigenous peoples? Were they like, this is a bad idea, like you shouldn't do that? And, you know, there's maybe stories about what's going to happen in the future. I mean, in Kluane Lake, and if you can post that, I think it was a Globe and Mail article of lowering water levels at Kluane. Like, my dad heard a story from one of the grandmas that said, you know, grandson, you need to be prepared for when Kluane Lake becomes a river. Kluane Lake is one of the hugest lakes in the Yukon. It's glacier fed, but the glaciers receded. And so it's only draining on the other side, the Kaskawelsh Glacier. So Aichu is like that river, Slim's River. You can look at the photo, it's wild. Like Kluane Lake's gone down by 10 feet, right? Like we had to like totally get a whole new dock. Like the island that I talked jokingly with cousins about paddling out to, like, isn't an island anymore. So I think this is where like I think it's also a conversation about how real climate is. And if you can't see something and it doesn't impact you directly, it's really easy to just sort of push it away, right? Like I think even for sort of the mainland and being in Vancouver right now, yeah, people are talking about it. Wow, climate change, the floods and the fires this summer, like this is real. I'm like, yeah, it's real. Like it's so real that we all need to be responding, but it's also changing the ways that we're having a conversation about climate, because what we're really talking about isn't a climate problem, it's a people problem. Like we've got a people problem. So it's fundamentally changing the way that we look at things that we have access to. It's changing the way that we live. It's changing a whole lot of things, but it's also pushing those people who have the abilities to make some of these really critical decisions to do better. And I do want to acknowledge just before Bernice, hi, it's so nice to see you. And I really want to acknowledge, our soul sister, Sarah, who, as many of you know, far too early took her walk to the stars, but she and her story and her way of explaining reconciliation is like amazing. And I know that she has some of her videos in DN. So it is like looking to those people who have shared their stories and have changed the conversation, and taking that time to, like, for your kids to like Google, use Grandma Google. Very simple, lots of great stuff on there. Check out some of Sarah's talks, and there's also a scholarship for Indigenous women. So I encourage you to share that as well. But I think, now is, if not now, then when? And so I think as women, I know there's some men or those who identify who are here too, but I do think it could be a really powerful movement to see all women standing together to advance those values that Indigenous women continue to uphold, which is really about reconnection, support, and advancing the responsibilities that we have for the environment.
Thank you so much, Kluane, for sharing your knowledge and the initiatives that you've been starting and participating in and implementing. I just also want to acknowledge that Kim in the chat has posted a resource as well, www.canadianartsforreconciliationandeducation.com. And she says this is a new grassroots movement that has been created to hold space and educate people about Indigenous peoples of Canada. Please join us. And they have the next session is December 15th with a discussion of MMIWG 2S+ with Brenda Wilson, who's been a long time advocate and mountain mover in the MMIWG 2S+ movement. So if you go to Canadian Artists for Reconciliation and Education.com, you can join that event as well. So thank you, Kim, for sharing that. And thank you, Kluane, for your time and for all the hard work that you're leading in the Yukon and across this country, and for having the courage and bravery to put your name forward for a second term of the Yukon Regional Chief. So congratulations on your acclamation there. And just so looking forward to seeing what you achieve moving forward. Already noted as one of the top 25 influential women in Canada, and just recently named one of the top 100 most powerful women in Canada. So you have lots of more to do, and I'm so excited to see what else you do in your career. And I just want to thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. And I would be super remiss if I did not acknowledge my mother-in-law, who is a Mohawk matriarch. And all of you Indigenous women would know that I would be in big trouble. And so Gail Ayers, I just want to say thank you for all of your love and support. And of course, especially to you, Chastity, for continuing to lead with, to your point, the leading from the heart, right? It was a young person who once said, it's heavy. I said, it's heavy work. And she was like, it's heavy work and it's heart work. And so I've sort of continued to use that. And so really want to thank you and acknowledge you. And of course, for our team who, Emily and Jenny, who continue to do so much work for the region. So take good care and look forward to talking soon.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Kluane.
Thank you. Okay, we are wrapping things up. And before we do that, we have some things to give away. And the first thing that we are giving away is I think we'll do the, this is what we're doing. We're doing the Chloe Angus giveaway. So Chloe has been really generous with beautiful, beautiful work that is donated for DN to share with you, and also to give us a discount. So the code is deyen.10, and that will get you a 10% discount. And it's also in the chat there. And right now we are giving away a Corrine Hunt pillow cover, 2 pillow covers, and a Chilkat blanket by Wade Baker. It's a $600 value. You do need to be here, be present right now. And the winner is Stephanie Kalpa. Stephanie Kalpa, if you are here, please put your name in the chat and say, I'm here. And somebody will get a hold of you and make arrangements. So Stephanie, are you here, Stephanie? I don't see you in the chat yet. I'll give you a second to say you're here. You might be having a hard time finding your keyboard. And the other one, you don't need to be present for this, is we are giving away some DN scholarships. So a draw for free memberships for 4 people. And those winners are Kyla Ruddle, Ruddel, Nicole Semenoff, Roberta Stout, and Simranjeet Gill. And if I mispronounced any of your names, I apologize. So we will be contacting those people for their scholarships. And again, okay, so Stephanie is not here, so we're going to draw another one. And so the other draw is for the Chloe Angus gifts are Kim Gushi. Kim, are you here? I feel like Kim is here because I feel like people are clapping. Okay, yay, Kim, congratulations, you're here. You win the gift pack from Chloe Angus. And again, yay, Kim. Remember that the Chloe Angus promo code is DN10, and it's valid from now until December 10th for 10% off any item. Congratulations to Kim. Congratulations to the people that all won the scholarship. And once again, Chastity, a very successful afternoon. We went a little over, so we apologize. But a reminder that DN, the cohort 5, starts on January 4th. It's always a pleasure to spend time with all of you, especially Chastity and her group of friends. I'm always happy to be in Chastity's orbit. Yeah, happy holidays and a happy new year. If I don't see everybody, Chastity, do you have any parting words? No?
Thanking everyone for being here, and to Leah Bartko, to Elder Sequalia, to Regional Chief Kluane Adamek, and Kim for sharing the resource, and Bernice, always love you, and everyone for coming today. And thank you so much, Tamara, for hosting and holding a really beautiful space for us to move through our agendas. So thanks everyone, take good care, happy holidays, and look forward to seeing you on deyen.ca. And remember to gift DN with the promotional code of DN25. We'll give you 25% off. So thanks everyone, looking forward to more soon. All the very best.
See you soon.